Welcome to Between the Sheets, the non-judgmental podcast where we're going to cover various sexual health and wellness topics. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Zwanitzer. I'm a urology and sexual health nurse practitioner, and I love helping my patients and listeners discover and develop their most satisfying sexual experiences. Between the Sheets is here to normalize the conversations about sexual health and cover everything from basic anatomy to the most taboo topics and everything in between. Real talk, real pleasure, one episode at a time. So come on, let's get between the sheets. This episode is sponsored by Boston Scientific and its educational website on erectile dysfunction, edcure.com. One study estimated that more than 50% of men over the age of 40 have some degree of erectile dysfunction, which can be frustrating and confusing. Go to edcure.com to find information on erectile dysfunction and treatment options, including long-term treatment options offered by Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific does not endorse any statements or opinions expressed during this episode. Hey guys, welcome back to Between the Sheets. We have a wonderful guest with us today. Xanet Pailet is a nationally recognized sex and intimacy coach. She is a best-selling author of the book Living an Orgasmic Life and the Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit. She is the founder of Passionate Intimacy Retreats, where she has led over 100 couples of intimacy retreats. She has left a 26-year sexless marriage and a high-powered legal career and is now committed to couples who feel stuck, disconnected, or in conflict to transform their relationships into ones filled with intimacy, safety, passion, and joy. She has private and international group retreats. She shows couples how to create emotional and sexual connection that lasts. So welcome, Xanet. It is such a pleasure to have you here. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm excited to be here as well.
Yeah. So I guess your story started with your own marriage. So give us a little background. Tell us how you kind of found this field and this calling.
Yeah. As you said, I was in a sexless marriage for almost 3 decades, 26 years, which is a very long time.
That's a very long time.
to be in any marriage, let alone a sexless one. It really, and to be fair to my ex-husband, a lot of the issues around our sexless marriage had a lot to do with my own shame trauma that happened as a child and then some medical trauma that happened. So, sex until I reached my phase just never felt good. It was painful, uncomfortable. I never had an orgasm, no pleasure, right? It just was like, why do this?
Right. Why do something that doesn't bring you pleasure?
I could do lots of other things with my time. So I think that's really the genesis of why the marriage was sexless. But what happened, which is what always happens, is when, you don't have that emotional connection, the emotional intimacy that we really didn't have a very good, solid relationship around, which I recognize now.
Sure.
There was no way to really process it. There was no way to get help. There was no way to talk about it. And then, just as our sexual intimacy was never great, our emotional intimacy got worse and worse and worse. But we stayed in the marriage because we were raising 2 children and we were kind of running a family business on the side. So, it was very practical.
Right. Easier to stay married than get divorced.
Easier to stay married than get divorced, right? Maybe not the best perfect decision in retrospect, but it made sense at the time. But when I turned 50 and my kids were both in college and we had made the decision to separate, I knew that I wanted to date men. And I also was like, I don't know, I'm living in New York City. I couldn't imagine what that, online dating profile would look like.
Right.
I'm smart, I'm successful, I'm cute, I have a good body. It's just one thing. I really hate sex. What we can do about that?
Right.
So that was sort of the wake-up call in part. That was really the wake-up call for me to say, oh, okay, this is something I've really got to look into, like what's actually happening. And that became the that's what actually started the whole process. I found my way in through the door of Tantra and sacred sexuality. It just kind of like fell in my lap, so to speak. And it was life-changing. It was like, oh, wow, there's a whole different way to have sex. There's a whole different way about what sex actually means and how to feel about it and how to be treated around it, which just shocked me, to be honest with you. And that was like the first inkling of like, oh yeah, there's something else here. You're not broken because, anybody who's has trauma or has been in a sexless marriage, even if they can quote have sex, but they're still in a sexless marriage, they feel broken, right? They feel not desired. They feel like there's something that they're doing wrong, that they're not curious enough, that there's something wrong with them. And it was the first time I was like, okay, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not broken. Like maybe this is going to be okay at the end of the day. And that became my calling card. It became the opening to like, this is great. I'm learning a lot. I'm going to leave New York, move to California, where all the sexuality teachers are and programs. And I'm going to learn about this. And like, oh my God, I'm actually going to start teaching it. Okay. And one thing led to another. And then I was like, okay, Tantra is amazing. And I think it's incredibly powerful. But I can see there's so many more aspects of sexuality that I don't know and I don't understand. And I'm a lawyer, so I need to learn it all. And so that just led from one program to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And I did a series of trainings. I think the two most fundamental ones that I did was a somatic sex and intimacy training, which is run by the amazing Celeste Hirschman and Danielle Harrell. I was in their very first class. I think they're now up to like, I don't know, they've been doing this for 15 years. And that was profound. And it worked beautifully with the concept of Tantra because it was very somatic and experiential based, but it also gave me more of the psychological foundation of the early childhood wounds and all of the reasons that sexuality becomes really challenging for people. And then a couple of years ago, I completed a somatic experiencing 3-year training program. So I'm a certified trauma practitioner as well, because when you start working with sex, guess what?
Lots of
Trauma's
trauma.
there.
Lots of trauma.
Lots of trauma, right? Exactly. That's my journey. I've done a bunch of other things in between in terms of trainings, but that's really the journey of how I got to where I am now.
And do you enjoy sex now?
Yeah. What time is it? I think it's Saturday morning and I just had some good sex.
That's great. We love that. Yes. That's awesome.
Yes,
Talk
for
to me
sure.
more about Tantra. What kind of concepts does that teach? How does that help you kind of reconnect with yourself and your partner?
So I think that for me, what was really powerful about Tantra, which is, its own energetic practice, if you will. And obviously there's just a long history around it, which I'm not going to go into. But it really focuses on breath and sound and movement to be able to move the sexual energy around your body and even to be able to find sexual energy in your body as well. And I think it can be, for many couples and individuals, a very powerful practice, especially if genital touch, genital contact is challenging, if sex feels scary, if they're in a sexless marriage. You can come into sexuality in sort of a softer, kinder way if you can access the energy, which not everybody can. I mean, we all have the ability to access energy in our body, and some people it comes really naturally, like it did to me at some level, and some people they're just like, I don't feel a thing. But what it does is it really helps to co-regulate two different nervous systems.
Okay.
Because when you're simultaneously breathing with your partner, like this is what our nervous systems want. They want to co-regulate with each other. And we can regulate up and we can regulate down. And Tantra is about regulating down to the rest and digest, the relaxed state. And it creates a lot of connection, right? When you're just like holding your partner and you're breathing together for 5 minutes, right? And your energy starts to come together. It has a sensation that you don't have in a lot of other spaces, I would say. So it can be a very calming, grounding. It can also be very erotic if you're, really trained in it and you start, the faster you breathe, the more intense sexual energy you bring. You can run energy through your body so that you're having non-ejaculatory for both women and men,
Yeah.
orgasms, like energetic orgasms. So it can also be very erotic.
Hmm.
But I use it a lot in my work with couples to help them like ground and to reconnect
Hmm.
and to notice what does it feel like when your nervous systems are actually attuned to each other, because
Yeah.
so many people come in with like such high levels of misattunement.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things too. Our body can't experience pleasure when we're in flight or fight. When our
Mm-mm,
sympathetic is taking over, we can't get those orgasms. We can't relax to enjoy
totally.
it. And so you really, like you're saying, you have to down regulate and get to that parasympathetic system to truly be able to enjoy. And how many of us live our lives in fight or flight
Yeah,
every
yeah,
day? And
yeah.
no tigers are chasing us.
Only in our mind, in our
That's right.
body.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I love that. So you can learn to do Tantra yourself to help
Mhm,
regulate yourself,
you
but then
can.
you can also do it with your partner to kind of grow that connection and regulate together.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely, yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah, it
love
can be
that.
solo tantra or, traditionally, I mean, yes, a lot of solo tantra exists, but traditionally it's couple tantra
Yeah.
where you're circulating, the energy together. So it's a very powerful practice.
Hmm.
And I always incorporate little bits and pieces of it in the work that I do because it is one of the best ways to help people downregulate.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yes.
amazing. I know, and
Yeah.
there are times too where I like this concept because, for example, last night I got home, it was late, I had a thing to do after work, and so it was a long day, and I got home and I wanted intimacy, but I was not ready for putting energy into sex.
Mhm.
And we had a great cuddle session while we were talking, just holding each other. And to me, in that moment, that was the type of intimacy I needed. Now, today, I'm sure I will want a different type of intimacy. But it's nice to have that like flow and options. And I think that's really one thing that Tantra brings is especially in, like you said, in a sexless relationship, when you're trying to get back together, putting in time for physical sex and penetration is not always where to begin.
No.
Because, like you said, pain or trauma or other things where we need to rebuild that intimacy first. And then maybe we can get to the actual penetrative sex or more sex, regardless of how you're doing it, oral or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that experience that you had, right? Because, really, I think my philosophy is, and this is what my sex and intimacy repair kit is based on, and really my work with couples is based on, that you have to actually create that emotional connection and that
Hmm.
emotional intimacy, right? In
Yeah.
order to be able to allow sexual intimacy to develop and flow. And so that cuddling, that holding each other, that just talking with each other, right, begins to start to that, if you're doing some tantra and breathing together, like that starts to create some more of that
Hmm.
emotional safety together because at least your nervous systems are in the same place, right?
Yeah.
And you're not in a fight and flight space. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's
100% agree
amazing.
with
I
that.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Tell me
Yeah.
about your first book that you wrote.
Living an Orgasmic Life. So
Yeah.
Living an Orgasmic Life came out in 2018, and, that book is, really primarily geared towards women.
Okay.
So, and it's really about what blocks us from feeling pleasure in our body, all of the things, the childhood wounds, the trauma, all of it,
Yeah.
and then what we can do to change that, was also very much my own personal journey of sexual awakening, sexual healing, which I, thread throughout that book, as
Mhm.
well as case studies from the clients I had worked with. And it's a really powerful book for women. I was shocked when it came out how many like people just like emailed me and told me like reading that book changed my life. I'm like, wow, okay. And because I think at the time, this was 2018, right? So what was that, 8 years ago? People weren't really talking about this as much, and there
Yeah.
weren't as many women that were coming forward and saying, I lived in a sexless marriage for 26 years.
Right.
And at the age of 50, I was able to actually turn things around. So I think people found it very relatable. It also has a lot of information about Tantra because that was my doorway to sexuality. And I really wanted people to understand more about the practices and the possibilities around that. So that's my Living an Orgasmic Life book. Yeah.
That's amazing. And
Yes.
I love that you
Yeah.
were able to bring your own personal story in because I think when we share our personal stories, it really helps connect with other people that they're
Yeah.
not alone. Like you said earlier, they're not broken.
Right.
There are a lot of people in sexless or not great sex marriages.
Yes, a
And
lot of not great sex marriages,
yes,
Stephanie.
yes. And a lot of people, you get yourself into that because you're early, maybe in dating or early in marriage, whatever. And you say, oh, that felt really good. Or you pretend you had an orgasm, whatever. And then you just get into this habit of doing it every time. And if you just were honest from the start, you would have better
Yes,
sex.
yes,
But it's really
yes.
hard then after a couple of years to be like, hey, what you're doing actually doesn't work. And I've been faking it this whole time.
Yeah. 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 I had a client that was dealing with that, and it was very, very hard for her to actually admit to her partner what was actually happening. It took a lot of work to do that. And yes, that is that's the trap that a lot of women get stuck in for so many different reasons. Like they don't like how they're being touched, big piece of it, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what they want, also another big piece around it. And as well as just, they don't really know what good sex is.
Yeah.
And so that's part of our jobs, right? To
Yep.
educate people about what good sex actually is like, and that everybody is, able to experience pleasure. And a lot of women get stuck in that orgasm gap, right? It's
Yep.
it's super challenging. And a lot of women have shame because, and of course there's all the myths, right? We
Yes.
talk about all the myths, like the blueprints, like
Yep.
all of the garbage that we learned as children in society about like everybody's supposed to have orgasm simultaneously like that. And a man goes down on you in 2 minutes, you've
Right.
orgasm. Like, who does that happen to?
Right. Yeah. Or that you're in there doing the dishes and he touches you once and you're like, all right, let's have sex.
I'm
Like
ready to
that's not
go. Exactly.
most women have responsive desire. It takes
Right.
a little bit to get us going. You need to connect with us to get us going. You can't just snap your
Exactly.
fingers and we come.
I know, which is different than men, right? So
Right.
I understand why they think that,
Yep.
at some level. Like I touch your penis, you get hard. You touch my clit, I slap your hand,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Right. But that's and I think men are super confused about that because they haven't been well educated, right? None of us have been
Right.
well educated,
Yeah.
especially in my generation,
Absolutely. And,
whatnot.
it's also interesting that then there's shame on the other side of it too for women who desire sex all the time, have a very
Yes.
high drive, then
Right.
they feel shame because that's not what I'm supposed to do. That's supposed to be the man. Well,
Right.
no, honey. If you want to go get it. Like that's
Right.
we are very sexual beings. It's very normal for women to be just as horny as men.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, many of my couples, the women is the higher desire and the man is the
Mhm.
lower desire, right? So
Yeah.
that's, a flip. But yeah, no, absolutely. And there's all the slut shaming that goes on as well,
Mhm.
right? If
Yep.
you're not married and you're single and you just want to like have sex with a lot of different people, right? There's all of that. So yeah,
Yep.
it's hard. It's hard to, be able to for some people, for many people to feel good about your sexuality, to feel free about your sexuality.
Yeah.
And not have some experience around shame or regret or grief or
Yep.
sadness or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I totally agree. And then you've
Yeah.
written a second book as well?
Yeah. So the second book is coming out. Maybe I don't know when this is airing, March 26th.
Okay.
And it's called The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit. And that book is really based on the work that I've been doing for the last 7 years, which is with couples
Mhm.
primarily who are in sexless marriages or who are experiencing very severe intimacy issues. And a lot of
Mhm.
them are at the verge of separation.
Yeah.
And that book hopefully will be a bestseller too. I don't know.
You got that,
So
listeners? Go buy this book.
y'all go buy this book.
Yes, that's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, and the premise of that book is that in order to be able to kind of what I said at the beginning, in order to really be able to express yourself fully sexually and really move into a very, beautiful sexual, long-term, passionate relationship, you need to actually make sure that there's emotional intimacy and emotional safety there. And so
Mhm.
a good portion, and this is so true for women, especially for
Yeah.
women. So a good portion of the book is, excuse me, really about what does emotional safety mean? How do you achieve it? All sorts of different tools and skills to be able to, deal with vulnerability
Mhm.
and listening empathetically, and I teach people how to repair and understand how your childhood wounds show up, trigger each other, all of that stuff, and then how to be able to sort that out. And then I wrote it in a way in which I drop people into a coaching session, so it's very dialogue driven,
Okay.
so not so didactic, because I was like, yeah, I think this would be a more interesting approach. And
Yeah.
so
And
we'll
like we
see.
said, stories resonate. They
And
help
stories
people.
resonate, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh yeah, I can relate to that couple.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that experience. And then we focus on like 3 aspects of sexuality that I think are, you could write 10 books on it, right? But like
Yeah.
3 aspects. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
what are the 3 most important things I think couples need to know? Which is like, we have to redefine what sex is.
Mhm.
We have to understand that we have different sexual styles, and I work off of Jaya's erotic blueprints,
Mhm.
right? Looking at the different sexual styles, which I think is so important for couples because
Yeah.
it gives them a lexicon, it gives them a language, it gives them like, oh, I get it. Now I understand. She's sensual and I'm sexual. And now I get,
Yeah.
whatever is happening, right? And then how to integrate it. And then really looking at core desires, which
Mhm.
are Jack Moore and Celeste and Danielle is really looking at what are the emotions that we want
Mm.
to have around sex coming from our fantasies and peak sexual experiences. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's amazing. For the blueprints that she was referring to, we do have a couple episodes in the past that you guys
yeah,
can listen to that we've talked about that, but it's basically like the 5 love languages that most people are familiar with from Gary Chapman. This is 5 basically types of blueprints of how you experience sex and sexuality. So it's help me go through them. It's
it's
sensual.
sensual, energetic, sexual, kinky, and shapeshifter.
Yes, and the shapeshifter kind of goes between all of the different ones.
All the different
So
ones,
it
right?
really does help. There's quizzes and stuff you can take, and it helps you figure out your own blueprint and your partner's blueprint, which gives you talking points that you
Hmm.
can then be like, okay, well, you like this, but that's not really my forte. So what could we do in between there that
Right.
would help you, but I would be comfortable with, and vice versa.
Yep.
And it really helps. I think it really helps men understand their partner better. I think, women were a little bit more, obviously, this is very generic terms. Women tend to be more emotionally intelligent. So we can
Right.
pick up on what they need better. And most men are going to be more sexually based to start with. But for the male partner to learn his female's language, that can really help because he can learn how to actually get her aroused. Again,
Right.
most women are responsive arousal. And
Right.
so, those tools are so important, especially if like you guys do like it when you have sex together, but like you're not on the same page most days, or, what he does to tell you he's in the mood doesn't work for you. What she does, you don't even realize is her trying to be flirty with you. I think it
Right.
really gives a lot of good talking points.
I think it does as well. My one caveat I tell all of my couples, because, have them all take the blueprint quiz
Yeah.
and then we come and do a 4-day retreat. You don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
Like I would say a lot of times, people will be low, particularly women on the kinky scale.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes men will be low on the sensual scale, but then
Mm-hmm.
we actually like start to explore all the 4 different blueprints. Things really start shifting. So I love it, and it's a tool that I definitely use. And I also would say like, and it may not be correct because you haven't had the experience.
Yeah.
Or you have a misdefinition in your mind when you were
Mm-hmm.
taking that test, about what kinky is in
Right.
particular. I think that that's
And
the
it
one that I
changes
find a lot
over
of times.
time.
And it changes over time,
My
right?
blueprint was when my kids were toddlers is very different than what my blueprint
Right.
is now that they're in college.
Hmm.
So, and just my own phase of
Definitely.
life, being perimenopause versus postpartum versus young kid, like my own hormones and my own personal journey. So it's definitely something that, yes, this is what you are in this moment, but maybe as you evolve and as you're actually having these conversations 6 months from now, a year from now, take the quiz again. Cause you
Yeah,
may,
yeah.
like you're saying, you don't know what you don't know. You may evolve and all of a sudden something else, bam, that gets you in the mood.
It's not unlike the love languages,
Yeah.
right? That also shifts over time where you are in the relationship, what needs are being met, what needs aren't being met quite as well,
Uh,
right? So I think that's true. It definitely evolves over time.
yeah.
But I think the piece that I really want to talk about is the core desires
Hmm.
piece. And because I think that's something that people don't understand very well
Yeah.
and is a really important, having great sex,
Hmm.
right? And I think the blueprints work along with it. it's really looking underneath those blueprints and then in other ways as to like, what are the emotions that you want to have around sex, right? Because if you're somebody who wants to be ravaged, let's say, because that makes you feel desirable, because that's one of your core desires. It's like, I want to, be desired because maybe I grew up in a household where I didn't feel that way, where I wasn't important, right? Because to our core childhood wounds. But your partner is just making sweet, sensual, love to you. It may feel good. You might have an orgasm, but it's not really getting to that, like, that really deep desire that's fulfilling that part of you. And I don't think that it's talked about quite enough. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that, like, that's what we really, that's another really critical piece of looking at, like, how do I want to feel, not physically, but emotionally when I'm having sex with my partner? Because when that emotional need is met, sex becomes so much more hot and desirable, right?
Sure.
Like, if that emotion is met over and over, you're going to want to keep on having it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an important piece.
So what are those cores that you're referring to?
So core desires are the feelings that you want to have. And when we do this core desire exercise, there's like 35 different types of feelings. But here's what's important to know, right? A couple of things. First of all, these arise from our childhood wounds. It is actually, that's why they're so powerful. It's a way to actually soothe our childhood wounds, right? And we do it through, it happens, and you can identify these through a variety of different ways. But you can look at, what we call different types of movies: a spiritual movie, a romantic movie, a kinky movie, like more kind of along the sexual styles of Jaya, but looking at the feelings. But really, like, it arises from these childhood wounds. And so in our fantasies, so we identify them from like our most common fantasies, which I find a lot of women don't have.
Yeah.
Or are aware of that they're having, that's a fantasy, or something that's never happened. But man, if that happened, that would be so hot. And that might be derived from, erotica or some other thing that you've created in your mind, but you haven't really fantasized about. But it does one of two things. It either repairs what happened in your childhood, or it's repetition with agency. So, for example, if you were a child that, well, like me, if you were a child that had to be like super independent, right? And, take care of your mom and be the emotional support for everybody, and none of your needs felt your emotional needs were met, right? And then you're create your own business and you're the CEO, all this other stuff, right? My core desire is total surrender. It's hard for me, still hard for me, right? But when I can get to the place where I can totally surrender to my partner in a very submissive way, it's amazing. And I desire that all the time. That's meeting one of my emotional core desires. I've got other ones too. I like exposure. As well, like people to watch me, because I felt very like stifled as a child, and I felt like I was teased a lot, right? So there's something about that I think is repetition with agency, right? That's not the repair, the repetition with agency.
Yeah.
And a repetition with agency could be if you were a child that was very constrained by your parents and held very closely on a leash. It might be a hot thing for your partner to collar you and walk you around on a leash, right? But you're doing it with agency, with consent.
Yes.
And again, very reparative. And so that's why it gets at these very, very deep, pieces of us that creates our hottest experiences.
Yeah. And a lot of this is coming back to communication with your partner, because you have to
Yes.
establish consent, like you said. It has to feel safe. And so how do you help couples kind of start to have those conversations when maybe they are in this sexless, loveless, not necessarily loveless, sexless, intimacy-less relationship?
Well, okay. I start in a couple of ways, but one of the things I've done is created a tool, because I find that the conversations are really hard to start. People are afraid they're going to open up Pandora's box, right?
Yep.
and don't know what's going to happen afterwards, especially if they're in a sexless marriage and they can't communicate, which typically go hand in hand.
Yes.
And so the tool is intimacy equation formula. So it's like this, cute little 3-minute quiz that you can take where you get to identify like what your intimacy style is like. Are you somebody who comes into intimacy through talking? Are you somebody who comes into it through touch? Is adventure important to you? Is it about trust and loyalty, right? Like really kind of understanding that piece. And I'll tell you where you can find it. You can go to howtoimprovemylovelife.com, howtoimprovemylovelife.com. I think because generally speaking, it's women who are going to perhaps start this approach, maybe, I don't know, in my experience, or maybe men, and then you go to your partner and you're like, hey, I took this kind of fun quiz about my intimacy style. I'm curious, like what yours is, right? So it's kind of a low risk way. And I do tell couples, like, you want to start this conversation in a low risk way.
Yeah.
You do not want to start this conversation and like, hey, we haven't had sex in 3 years.
Right.
We've got a problem.
Yes. Yes.
You've got to find a low risk way to start the conversation. And I have found that this has been a really good tool for couples to begin to start the conversation and understand how their styles interact with each other and what are the good things about it and what are the things that you kind of have to be aware of as well. So low risk, conversations, not like let's start the whole, ball of wax. That's one way.
And I love that. I generally suggest to people, hey, if this podcast episode resonated with you, share it with your partner and say, hey, can we talk about this later? If you read a blog or a book or whatever, share it with your partner and say, hey, this really spoke to me. Can we talk? Can you look at it too? And we can talk about it, because that is a pretty low risk way. It's not saying, hey, this is exactly how I feel and you're not doing this. It's like saying, hey, they talked about this topic in this podcast that really resonated with me. Maybe it'll resonate with you too, and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And it really takes that pressure off of you saying, I don't think our sex life is good enough.
Right, exactly. That's what happened with my first book. Like so many men read it, even though it was geared towards women, but men want to understand women, right? So, and then showed it to their partners as well, right? And so, yes, I agree with that. Like that's another low risk way of sharing information without blaming or shaming, pointing fingers, and then just creating more distance and conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. So once they start these conversations, how do you kind of like get them to pull out the real issues and work through, start that process?
Well, I mean, when I work with couples on a retreat, so I do individual one-on-one retreats in Asheville over 4 to 5 days, depending upon where they are. We actually start in a different way. We start with like creating the emotional safety, right? And through some practices, through some eye gazing, through some, rituals like exercises I put them through around empathy. What's it like to stand in your partner's shoes, to kind of understand who your partner is? Can you express that? Does that resonate with them, right? So I like to really start to create that emotional connection and then emotional safety. And then I do some rituals from the Tantra world and wind into that a communication exercise about sex and love, right? Starting with like, how do you like to be loved? How can I love you more? And then what holds us back sexually? And that starts by that point, like there's been enough safety established in the room amongst all three of us that generally there's a lot that comes out from that space, right? But, honestly, Stephanie, like the couples that I see are often at their end of their rope, right? And so we might spend the next day of the retreat just like going back and trying to do some repair and bringing up all of the ways in which there's been resentment that's built up or betrayal that's built up or disappointment, and helping them be able to, in a very safe way, be able to express that to each other, which I often do through like talking through them, like the puppet little approach, which is very effective because often they don't know how to say it, but I can say it for them, or at least decently, so that they start to be like, oh, okay. And here's a process that I'm going to teach you to be able to create this ability to repair when you're feeling distance from each other, when you're feeling disconnected from each other, that will create more connection and more intimacy. And so ultimately you'll know that, okay, yeah, we're going to have a fight, but we're not going to sweep it under the rug like we've done for the last 15 years and built
Yeah.
up all of this resentment. We know we're going to be able to repair this. And after a while, after we've done this a couple of times we're going to have the safety in our bodies that it's not going to destroy us. It's going to actually create more connection and more closeness, right? So
Yeah.
it's a very somatic, experiential, immersive experience for them to have that feeling in their body about what safety feels like in the relationship itself. And
Yeah.
in my book, I take people through, some parts of the exercises as
Okay.
well. Yeah,
Okay, perfect. I love that when you do these retreats, you get several days with them to really work through these processes and teach them so they have these tools when
right.
they leave you to keep progressing their relationship.
Right, exactly. And that's important, right? For them to have the tools. And I think also like, I've been doing this for 15 years, right?
Mhm.
And during the pandemic, I did a lot on obviously virtual.
Yeah.
And it just was super frustrating to me working with couples. And I know plenty of people do it and do it well. I don't.
Yeah.
I like actually need to see them in the room, and I don't like the time. We work in 3-hour blocks on my
Mhm.
retreats, which is plenty of time. But you see stuff that shows up in real time, and you
Mhm.
don't have a clock that says we have to stop now.
Right.
It's like right now we're going to go right into that thing that happened 30 years ago. This
Yeah.
happens all the time. And we're going to talk about the feelings that you've never actually expressed to each other about it. And that's incredibly healing for
Yeah.
them because nobody's done that.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. So you do, I can't remember, do you do group retreats as well, or do you just do the individualized ones?
No, I do once a year. I just, excuse me, I just came back from Costa Rica. I do retreats in Costa Rica once a year for group.
Okay.
And yeah, and these retreats are like next year, I'm going to do a retreat focused more on like the emotional connection, the emotional
Mhm.
intimacy. There'll be some sexual stuff, of course, as well.
Yep.
And then I kind of level them up. And then they can, next year, or the next retreat, they can go to one that's a little more heavily erotic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's neat. So are the people who come to the group retreats generally ones that have already worked with you individually, or is it more of a new patient kind of thing?
It's a mix.
Okay.
Usually I have, depends which retreat I'm doing.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
yeah.
right, like, 1 or 2 couples that have worked with me individually, and then then they also wanna come to a group retreat because it's a different
Sure.
experience.
Yep.
It's like not only are you in a group, but, like, we're doing blue clay rituals in the lake,
Okay.
and, we're doing cacao ceremonies and sound healing, and
Yeah.
it's just a different, more immersive experience
Mhm.
in nature, right?
Yeah.
But then there's always, like, a fair amount of people that I've never met before. I mean,
Yeah.
I meet them on Zoom because we have a pre-retreat,
Sure.
I screen out people,
Yeah.
but I've never met them before, and they just come.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
neat. I
which
think,
is fun.
some people really do well in the group environment for the whole I'm not alone, I'm not broken, like we talked about earlier. And
Right.
then other people, that is very uncomfortable. It's
Yes.
uncomfortable to even admit you have issues and then to do that in a group setting. So
Yeah,
I love that you have both that you offer because I think
yeah,
that really helps people in different phases of their relationship too.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One thing that's really interesting about the group process, particularly for men, right,
Hmm.
is, women, we cocoon, like,
Yeah.
we nest with each other.
Yes,
But
we
men
do.
don't do that, right? Like, they
Right.
don't talk about this stuff, and I think one of the thing that comes out of the retreats every year is how connected the men are,
Mm.
and what it feels like to have, like, a brotherhood of
Hmm.
other men who they can actually share stuff about their relationship with,
Yeah.
and many of them maintain those relationships for, long periods of time as well,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful thing.
It is. I actually had a guest on here who works with male groups because of the
Mhm,
research behind it and how much men do need that connection, but it's not
mhm.
considered normal, I guess. It's not societally normal for them to have those deep conversations with other men or to have, girls' night out and they have guys' night out, but then they just go play pool or something. Whereas at
Right,
girls' night out, we tell each other everything.
right,
So,
right.
it was interesting to listen to his perspective and the research on it, on how much men truly need other men to
Mhm.
support them and to help them go through these kinds of things.
Definitely. Yeah. It's a shame that our society is so misogynist around
Yeah.
it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a shame because everybody needs support and we all need community and we all need connection and everybody really actually does want to be vulnerable. I think that's one of the fun things that happens in the retreat.
Yeah.
Everybody like says, "Oh, I'm afraid of being vulnerable." And then the very first exercise, I make them all be
Yeah.
vulnerable. And they're like, "That felt so good to
Yeah.
be able to like say those things I've never said before."
Yeah.
Right?
I bet. That's amazing. That's amazing. What a fun conversation today. I'm so glad you've been on here with us. Tell people how they can get in touch with you, find you, remind them of the names of your books.
Yeah. So you can go to my website, which is passionateintimacyretreats with an S.com, passionateintimacyretreats.com. The names of my books, you can find my books on Amazon, Barnes and Barnes and Noble, and some other nonprofit things, which are Living an Orgasmic Life and the Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit.
And we will put those links and the names of the books in the show notes. So if you're driving right now, you don't have to try and write this down while you're driving. Just be safe. And we'll get you those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. Such a great conversation today.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. If you need health and hormone and sexual wellness tips and treatment, go ahead and go to reviveish.com and sign up for a consultation. And as always, go have some fun between the sheets. Thank you for joining us and exploring sexual health topics here on Between the Sheets. New episodes are available every Wednesday. Please subscribe and rate our podcast so we can reach more listeners. And don't forget to tell your friends, partners, and anyone who will listen about Between the Sheets. Send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. It's all one word, podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and go have some fun between the sheets.